Hey, let me ask you guys a question. When you take a look at this picture, where do your eyes naturally gravitate to? Probably the blue dot, right? Even though the blue dot represents a very small portion of the picture, and the rest of it is this bright traffic cone color orange that's meant to be eye-catching, taking up a significantly larger portion. Our eyes, we go towards the blue dot because it's what stands out. At least that's where my eyes go to. What does that have to do with anything? Well, you see, Kabam, they came out with their champion attribute system, and it's kind of an interesting system. If we look at the purpose behind it, Kabam is saying that their main goal of the champion attributes is to help summoners, new and old, have an idea of the strengths and weaknesses of a champion at a glance. In order to do this, attributes are broken down into 5 separate categories: damage, survivability, ease of use, utility, and defender strength. And this article, it's kind of a long read. It's an interesting read. I recommend, reading it all for yourself. But when I see articles of this length, typically I like to give it a once over, not really reading the stuff, just kind of scrolling down, seeing what sticks out. So I give it just that once over. And as I scroll all the way down to the bottom, I see the list of champions here. And this is what I really want to see. Like, where does Kabam, rate their attributes? And, these were updated at some point. Before Thing was added, She-Hulk was the lowest champion on the list for science, and Warlock the lowest champion on the list for tech. Not because of their attributes, just, alphabetically, that's where things stood. And I'm like, okay, well, I know these champions. Let's take a look at them from different class types and see how they measure up. So we take a look at She-Hulk here first, and I scroll down to her stats, and the first thing I see is survivability, and I see a 4. I'm like, really? Survivability, a 4? That's interesting because, I think I know She-Hulk fairly well. I'm certainly not the best She-Hulk player out there. Unless your name is Metal Sonic Dude, you're not either. But the point is, like, I know her abilities well enough. But I look at Aunt May anyway because I'm like, well, I don't remember exactly what her stats look like, so let's take a look. I do see that she has a little bit above average health, but it's not astronomically above average. She's got below average armor, she's got below average block proficiency, a little bit of physical resistance to help balance things out, but really not too much. And then looking through her kit, I don't see a lot else here that would contribute towards a survivability score. She has a taunt, but I don't believe it works the same way as other taunts from the likes of, Stark Spidey that actually reduce the opponent's attack when taunted. I think this is just this passive taunt. I could be wrong in that. I didn't actually test it, but it doesn't say anything about reducing the opponent's attack here. I'm trying to look at everything else. She does have poison immunity, which is nice. Mostly offensive though. She does have this very, very weak exhaustion on the special 1, which really doesn't do much of anything and doesn't have that long of a duration, drops off. Got a weakness on the special 3 that most people don't use. Like, the point is, I don't think there's a whole lot here that I would say She-Hulk gets a 4 in survivability. If we actually look at the, what Kabam describes survivability as, it says here that for champion survivability, we've identified a few major things that will help the character stay alive in the average fight. Examples of abilities like regeneration. Okay, She-Hulk doesn't have that. A champion's average damage taken, which I'm assuming that's just like if you're just getting hit. Can you reduce that damage? And She-Hulk, I mean, she doesn't really have the best way of reducing that damage, as we saw from her stats and everything. So, I don't know if she really has that too much of that going for her. And what their average health loss versus health gained in a fight is. Well, she certainly doesn't gain any health unless she's suffering from a debuff and willpower or something like that. So, pretty interesting. But I mean, I guess champion average damage taken could also mean just like the proportion of like damage dealt versus damage taken. I'm not exactly sure. It's but either way, I would not expect a champion that doesn't really have much in the way of defensive stats to score as high as Kabam gave her with a 4 in terms of survivability. I look at a champion like Warlock for comparison, because I know Warlock is a bit tankier. He's not the tankiest. His healing is not the most amazing, but wow, scores a full point lower in terms of survivability. So once again, I go over to Aunt May, this website that I just found, literally this instant, and I see, well, Warlock has higher armor, and this is not even including his armor buff. That will, it's always active unless he gets hit with an armor break or something. He's got much higher block proficiency. He does have a way to heal, even though it's not the most insane healing ever. He's got immunities like crazy. He's got, he lowers the opponent's ability accuracy, which can help him survive better in some instances. While having the armor up, opponent's special attacks cannot be critical. There's a lot going on here for him to get a 3 compared to She-Hulk's 4. So what I'm trying to figure out is this just a blue dot? Is the system actually good? And what we're looking at is just an anomaly here. Is just something that stands out. Maybe something went wrong in the data collection or something. I don't know what happened, but it doesn't quite feel right. So what I did is created the spreadsheet, or actually Clarky Jr. created this spreadsheet, and then I filled it out and everything. But basically tallied up all of the stats that Kabam gave to their champions, what they assigned, and then I just wanted to list out what I felt like was the appropriate numbers, so that way the two can be compared. Now there is one thing missing here, which I'm going to circle back to later on, which is the ease of use category. I've completely eliminated that from this table. I still have it here, but it's not being tracked in the total points, and I'm going to come back to that later. That's yeah, well, let's just leave it at that. I'm gonna come back to it later. All right, so let's take a look at some of these numbers here. Are things wildly different from what I rated the champs to what Kabam rated the champs? Well, how can we see something like that at a glance? Well, what we could do actually is we could take all of the totals here, and we can get the totals of the totals. So let's go ahead and actually do that. And we can see that the total attributes that I assigned to all the champions was 370. And if we do the same thing over here on Kabam's side, we can see that the total number of attributes that they assigned to all the champions was 368.5. Wow. Actually not that much different, even though I spent about 4 hours on 2 separate streams doing all this live, which kind of a headache. I don't know if I recommend doing something like that live. I probably won't do it again, but doing it live, it did help in some instances, getting some contributions from people in the chat when I was kind of unsure about how a champion works, because contrary to what some people might believe, I actually don't know all the champions. I know very few champions well, and that I know some champions fairly well, but I don't play them regularly. Anyway, if I did not ask for people's help, then these two numbers might have actually been identical, because there were some instances where I bumped the points up where I didn't really want to. So, for example here, Nick Fury. Now, Nick Fury, I actually, bumped up his survivability from a 3.5 in Kabam's eyes to a 4. And the reason for that is, he's got a second life. And these days, quests are much shorter, so you're spending less time in your second life, unless you're intentionally getting there. The average quest these days, they're almost identical. It's almost a copy-paste job from quest to quest. 6 fights, then the boss. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It seems like that's what players like. But in the past, paths varied quite a bit. And you could have some paths that are, easily in the double digits. I think I took a path in 6.2 during my itemless series that was like 20 fights long or something like that, and it was ridiculous. Where his second life certainly would have, come into play a lot more. But in the average quest or alliance war or something like that, you're not taking that many fights. You're probably spending more time in your first life than your second life, unless you're intentionally trying to get to the second life to amp up your damage. Now, speaking of, I would have actually dropped down Fury's damage as a result of that, where I know his damage is bonkers in his second life, and the damage is still fine in the first life, assuming you have deep wounds, and you're able to get your last hit of your light attack, and the opponent's not bleed immune, or have bleed resistance, or is a skill champ that can shrug off those things. There's a lot that can get in the way of Fury's damage, even though it is high. And yeah, I felt like I run into those instances enough that I would not have given a 5 to Fury's damage. I would have dropped it down to a 4.5. So the point is, like, a lot of the numbers actually they're not wildly different. What I'm kind of considering compared to what Kabam is considering, it's just kind of different, just assigned in different ways. Now, I'm not saying Kabam's way is wrong. They've got all this data and stuff like that, right? But and certainly I'm coming from a place of more bias than if I had access to the data. But there are those certain things that I still definitely question. Once again, circling back to Shield survivability. But for the most part, what I realized is a lot of those instances, it did feel like they were just the blue dots. And for the most part, it's fine. For the most part, the champion rating system is fine. It's not the end of the world either way. It's, this is a strategy game at the end of the day. These attributes, they can't do anything more than what Kabam noted in the first place, which is just to give an idea of strength and weakness of a champion at a glance. And I think that's fine. But there is kind of one standout here that I am not fine with, which is the ease of use category. I don't think this represents the best way of looking at champions. I think it's an interesting category from like a development standpoint, because if we look at an old balance post that Kabam made, this is back when they adjusted champs like Torch, Cole, Namor, Ebony Maw for the first time. They came out with some of these charts saying this chart shows a comparison of Cole's DPS versus other high damage dealing champions throughout Act 6. This is also separated by player skill. So that's kind of what the ease of use thing is. It shows, damage levels for like the top 10%, top 30, 50, 70, 90, showing all the damage. And the ease of use is like, okay, well, how hard is it to score higher on, these charts essentially, where Again, I think that's interesting for devs to look at. I think some players would really enjoy looking at stuff like that. I enjoy it personally, but when I think of what's going to help a player out, I don't think it's the ease of use category. I actually think it's something closer to the noob-friendly category. Now, I'm not saying this is the best title ever. I don't think it's. I think it should be reworked for sure, but. I still feel like it will help players more than ease of use will. Noob friendly, the idea behind this is really just to show, give some guidance and direct new players of champions that they would have a good time with. I think it factors in, what style of combos you have to do. So the closer you are to the standard 5-hit combo, the better you would score in the noob friendly way. That's why Quake is, a 1, whereas, Kabam also gave a 1 in this instance. But I also think Aegon is a 1 where you need to hold a high combo, where a new player, they're not going to be able to do that, man. Whereas Kabam gave Aegon a 4 in terms of ease of use, which I agree with if we're talking about you're in the abyss where the champ is, works best and stuff. Yeah, once you have your combo built up and everything, very easy to use, right? But this could be very misleading to a new player to say, oh, the champion's easy to use, where they might only be able to hold a combo of 5 or 10 before they get hit. So I think you got to factor in some things like that. I think you have to factor in survivability into the noob friendly category, since the more skilled you are at the game, the more experienced you are, the higher the ratio is of you hitting the opponent to you getting hit. Whereas when you're newer to the game, you're getting hit a lot more. So I think survivability should be factored in somewhat to this score. And yeah, I think either way, however you want to come up with the criteria for this, I just think it's a better way of guiding newer players to the game, and it should really be directed towards those new players, rather than just, you know, in some ways like an ego check for high level players. That's what ease of use kind of feels like in some ways. Yeah, so yeah, I also think that they should take the ease of use category and drop it down to the bottom. Maybe even separate it in some way, maybe just giving a different color to separate it or something like that, as that should kind of be it's on its own kind of thing, which is what I've done in these in the spreadsheet here. I kind of eliminated those categories, and the totals here, this came from you know, just the 4 categories and not the you know, the ease of use that was taken out. So last thing before we wrap up this video, I just thought it was interesting of what Kabam kind of saw as like the highest value champion when it comes to these 4 categories. Nick Fury came out on top, which I also rated Nick Fury pretty high, but like I said, you know, I might have also done that for his damage or something, rather than giving it a 5, but people in the chat were convincing me just leave it as a 5, so I did. My highest was if we take a look here, shouldn't really be too much of a surprise. I thought Doom was actually the highest. You know, Doom surprisingly was only a 16.5 in Kabam's totals, compared to the 19 that I gave him. And the damage is still somewhat questionable. I put it down as a 4 instead of higher because I know his damage is bonkers when you do, you know, the Doom cycle, get the special 3s into special 2s going. But there's a lot of instances where I've used Doom, and it's more important just to control the fight, like make sure to take away all their buffs. You know, I've used them against things like, you know, Rage, where you just got to get rid of those buffs or else the opponent's going to be unblockable. I've used them in situations where it's like the Node and Alliance where aggression prowess and the opponent, they basically stop gaining power after they get to a special 2, so your standard Doom cycle is not going to work, and just throwing special 1s, you can prevent them from throwing their specials essentially. It's just a really good way to control the opponent just by spamming special 1. And you know, if you have to stray away from the Doom cycles, then his damage is not, it just doesn't compare to the likes of you know, someone like Cosmic Ghost Rider or something. So I felt like it was appropriate to leave his damage at a 4, but he was still the highest overall rated champion in my opinion. Now the utility category here was really hard to judge. There's certainly some times where Kabam and I agreed about utility, but in other cases was lower a bit. Again, Fury, I docked him a point compared to what Kabam gave, and some of you might be thinking like, oh man, this guy just hates Fury, but I don't know, man. I felt like his utility is not the most important, but again, we don't know what Kabam is using for this criteria. They might really value something like anti-evade, where I don't necessarily value it as high, because I think most champions come with anti-evade just built into their kits, right? So if and some of you might just be thinking like, oh, first you say his damage sucks, even though I didn't say that. I just said it's lower in his first life. It's not super low, but it is lower. And then I also said, yeah, his utility, I'm docking him a point. So let's go to someone else playing the champion. I'll show you guys kind of what I mean. This is Legacy, even though my face is you know, kind of covering him. This is the legendary Lags here, or excuse me, the mythic Lags, I should really be saying, proven to be one of the best players in the entire game, right? And we take a look at his fight of Fury against, this is my Spider-Gwen in the Battlegrounds, And you could see here that, you know, Spider-Gwen, known for being one of the squirreliest, most evadiest, is that even a word, champion in the entire game, and Fury, who has anti-evade mechanics, Lags is not using those mechanics, at least not like building up his tactical charges to a 5. That way he can just eliminate the opponent's evade. No, what he's doing is he's using the ability that every champion has in their kit, as long as you put a point in the parry mastery, that is, which is stun, and the opponent cannot evade while they are stunned. Now, of course, there are some instances where the opponent is stun immune, and then having anti-evade abilities, it's much more important, and I totally get that, totally understand it. Evade is one of the nastiest, most lethal abilities a champion can have. But more often than not, when I fight a champ that can evade, I don't necessarily bring in an anti-evade champ. I just play the fight similar to how Lags is playing. You know, there's other ways to do this as well. You can use someone like Colossus and his heavy attack. There's like an extra hidden stun in there. There's ways around it, is what I'm getting at. Or I just take in a champ with higher survivability, because even if you slip up and get hit, well, if you can heal and recover from that, that's also a counter to evade. So yeah, even though Nick Fury has anti-evade utility, you don't necessarily always need it. And then from the damage side of things, this is an instance where, you know, Nick Fury, he's in his first life, struggling to, you know, get the final hit of the light, which is where the biggest portion of Fury's damage comes from. And you can see here that Lags is just barely finishing this fight, and he's just going to finish it with about 1 second on the clock. There we go. Let's go ahead and pause that. 1 second on the clock. It even goes down to 0 as the clock ticks. So the point is, I understand that the champion is a powerhouse and all that, but that's one of the reasons why, like, personally, I would have lowered his damage if people didn't convince me just to leave it as a 5. All that to say, the scoring here that Kabam gave, and how similar the totals were, and just maybe value just being placed differently in each of the categories. I'm okay with the system. I'm okay with the system outside of a few of those blue dots that maybe need to be ironed out. There really weren't too many of them. And at the end of the day, this is a strategy-based game. The ratings, they've never mattered to me too much. I've never made my own tier list. I've never critiqued other people's tier lists. This is the only instance of this because, well, it's an official thing now, and it's something that, you know, again, I think can help new players in particular, although it's not really being done with this ease of use category, and should really have a different category, in my opinion. And then it's also going to affect champion balance going forward. So I wanted to see, like, I mean, how much can we trust the numbers here? If where did Shield go? Well, she's at the bottom now. I wanted to see, like, well, can we trust a number like this when looking at the new champs? Because the new champs, by the way, you can see them. You can see here Scorpion. We've got the info on this champion, so we can see here that his damage is supposed to be a 4. So what if when he comes out his damage is much higher? He might get adjusted 6 months later. Don't know. We've got Black Cat here as well. Where does well, she's got a 5 out of 5 in terms of damage, so she's supposed to hit like a truck. I left these champions out of the list here just because, well, never played them, so don't know how I would even personally feel about them anyway. But yeah, that's the reason I took a look at this. I'm not going to keep this spreadsheet going. It's just a one-time experiment just to see once again, you know, how well I thought the system was compared to, you know, maybe if I just thought there was a couple standouts, a couple of blue dots. In any case, that will do it for this video. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Take care.